Hey, bro, can you hear me?
Yes, I can get you 5 on 5. I can see your video. Okay, yeah. You're live now.
Oh, good,
Yeah.
good, good.
Thank you for joining in.
Yeah, good to see you again, man.
Yeah, good to see you too. How's Nigeria today?
It's a bit cold and a bit raining as well. So
Okay. It's the same thing over here. It's been really quite cold. We haven't had sunshine like in 2 days now. Nothing.
yeah, same here, same here, same here.
So while we wait
Yeah,
for Patrick to join in from South Sudan, I just think we should go ahead with the program. We have just 40 minutes. I have to get back to
yeah,
business. All right. Thank you for joining in again. And we are going to follow an informal. The meeting is just going to be informal, no protocol, nothing. We're just going to do informal. And I want us today to look at the very crucial topic. Uh, it's making headlines around the world right now, and I really want us to look at it. Uh, and it's all about the coup saga in Niger and and other African countries. And we are trying to look at it vis-a-vis the security architecture and the governance problem in Africa. So before we start, I would like you to introduce yourself. Just to inform you, this meeting is on record and it will be available on YouTube. So I just want you to introduce yourself and what you do and how people can reach you. Over to you.
All right, thank you. So I'm Olayemi. I'm from Nigeria. I'm the host of the Disaffected Nigerian podcast, and I'm also the publisher of the Disaffected magazine. I enjoy talking about politics and culture. Yeah, so I guess that's that's all there is, you know.
Okay.
And it's a pleasure to be here today.
Okay. Thank you very much. I should actually confess I admire your perspective sometimes on a lot of political topics and in Africa and worldwide. I really follow up your writings and your opinions, and I get to admire them a lot. And I mean, it's great. So let's just get into the topic of today. And now we have a situation in hand in Niger, which is a coup which started about 2 weeks ago, if I'm not wrong. And up to now, I think the former president Mohamed Bazoum, is still in detention while there is a military government in place, an interim military government in place. Now, I just want to find out, this coup has had a lot of opinions worldwide, right from the United States, the United Nations, and individually all across Africa. I just want to find out what is the perspectives of Nigerians concerning this coup. Right back here in Cameroon, I should say, if you have to talk to people individually, they are like in support of it. It's like we have this governance problem, or I don't know, in Africa, and people think the ballot box doesn't work again, and so they think resulting to a coup d'état, it's the only solution. Like over here in Cameroon, our president has been in power for 40 years. It's 40 years now, and a lot of youths, a lot of people are disgruntled with governance in Africa, here in Cameroon, and so people think we cannot depose the president by elections. And so people are calling for a coup. And believe me, this coup is kind of inspiring. It started, I think, is it with Mali or yeah, with Mali, right? In 2020. It started with Mali in 2020. And it has gone through four nations now: Burkina Faso, Guinea, and now Niger. I should say Chad too, although it was a silent coup. Nobody's talking about it. I should say Chad too. And people are kind of seeing this as an inspiration to continue to get rid of the problem of bad governance. I just want to find out your opinion. What is the perspectives of Nigerians about this coup?
All right. So Nigerians are, for the most part, indifferent about it.
Mhm.
You know, however, Nigerians are against an interventionist policy. The Nigerian president happens to be the ECOWAS chair.
Yeah.
And so the president wrote to the Senate some weeks ago to allow the deployment of Nigerian troops to Niger. The request was turned down. And all over social media, Nigerians are against any attempts to intervene in the local affairs in Niger. Not necessarily because they support the coup or not, but because a lot of Nigerians feel we have bigger fish to fry as a people. We have a lot of problems on our hands. And so a lot of people feel, why are you intervening in Niger when there's so much for you to do as president? And mind you, he just got elected about 2 months ago. And so people like don't focus your attention on another country for now. And let me also say that during the previous administration, there was a time, there was a plan to build railway to connect to Niger. And from what we heard, the railway was actually going to reach Niger. Nigerians didn't want that. Nigerians were like, no, why are you wasting our resources, building another country's infrastructure? So I think the general sentiment is Nigerians are not too down with any attempts to intervene financially or militarily in the domestic affairs of another country. Now, you did say that this coup started with Mali and then Burkina Faso and then Chad and now Niger. I think what it strikes me as is that there seems to be a general disaffection, especially in Francophone African nations, with the status quo. Now, if you ask most Nigerians what they feel about imperialism or neocolonialism, most Nigerians won't even tell you much about that. Most Nigerians believe that the problems we have as a people is really, it starts and ends with the leadership. But I don't think that's how most French African nationals see their domestic affairs. I believe most French nationals still have this belief that there's French imperialism in their country. And I guess that's why there seem to be a growing number of French nations in Africa, where we're having coups and what have you. So that's my take.
Okay. Now, I want us to look at this in this way. Now, let's go back to 2010 with the advent of the Arab Spring, which started in Tunisia, I think. And the goal was in order to restore democratic governance, as they claim in quotes, and to foster human rights, as they claim still. And that was 2010. And we are now in the year 2023, and this series of coups in Africa started in the year 2020. I want to find out from you, do you think this growing, because I'll call it a security problem too, this rising tide of insecurity and disgruntlement in Africa, is it due to a governance problem, or is it due to the porous nature of the security architecture of African states? What do you think?
Well, I think bad governance leads to many problems in society, and definitely insecurity is one of them. Mm-hmm. So I would say primarily, it's for the most part the issue of bad governance. And the truth is this: whether it's democratic governance or military governance, Africa has had the worst of both worlds. It seems that we are kind of like shuffling between those two. Nigeria gained independence in 1960, and for the most part, Nigeria has had more military dictators than democratic presidents. And so Africa generally seems to be oscillating between those two extremes, and we've had the worst of both worlds, man. And so even these Arab nations that had their spring, North African countries had a spring in the 2010s, I don't think much can really be said of how they've advanced since then. So can they really say they are better off now than they were in the days of the disputes they had as leaders? And the same thing with Sudan. Of course, we know what happened between Sudan and South Sudan. Now, can South Sudan say they are better off today than they were when they had their clashes with Sudan? So I think the problem fundamentally with Africa is still the problem of leadership, and it doesn't matter which approach we take, whether the military route or the democratic route. We are still confronted with that fundamental problem of leadership, and so that's why the consequences of that have manifested themselves in multiple ways: insecurity, institutional corruption, mm-hmm. Secessionist agitation. Currently in Nigeria, we have secessionist agitations. The Southeast, feels marginalized from the Commonwealth of the country. And so I don't know whether you've heard of IPOB, led by one Nnamdi Kanu. Mm-hmm. That secessionist group has, they've engaged in some drastic measures, I would agree. But the thing is, it's a symptom of a sense of marginalization. And so bad leadership leads to so many problems, man. And so people are going to respond, okay. I'll give an example. In 2020, we had one of the largest protests in Nigerian history, the NSAS movement.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the NSAS movement is a response to bad governance, to the history of bad governance we have in this country. And so the people are going to respond. They're going to revolt against bad governance in multiple ways, whether be it they supporting military coups like Nigerians are doing, which is very, very interesting in itself. I mean, why would people be supporting a military coup? That tells you that, the bar for leadership in Africa is so low, so low.
Okay. So, in brief, the coup is as a result of governance problem.
Exactly. I had a chat with a Nigerian like a couple of days ago, and I told him to explain the political climate in Niger that preceded this coup.
Okay.
And then he said, it seems that their commonwealth as a people is being controlled by a handful of people.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the story in most African nations. Most African nations have that similar story, that their wealth is being controlled by a select few. He said their airport, for instance, was sold to a Turkish company. And after that, now the price in their plane ticket and everything went up astronomically.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to DR Congo, the mining sector in DR Congo is controlled by the Chinese. I think in Zambia also, their electricity or something is also controlled by the Chinese. So that is a similar story all across Africa. The people feel alienated from their own wealth, from their own resources. The people feel the political class is controlling everything. And so this general sense of disillusionment, this general disaffection with the system is really profound in Africa right now. So I guess Africa is at a crossroads right now. Okay. And I don't know, man. I don't know.
Now, I want to find out from you. Do you think this, this growing, this isolationism policy in which a lot of people are isolated from the governance affairs and the domestic affairs of their nations is due to, should I say, foreign interference? Like, for example, you may have a country like, people will say, like in Cameroon, for example, people will say, a country like France, it is due to them that we have a certain political class that is ruling the people and never wants to give up in power. And so what this political class is trying to do is to satisfy the interests of France rather than, the needs of the people. Do you think this growing isolationism, or this, or should I call it, is due to foreign interference a lot than the fact that these people are just egoistic and selfish?
Okay, let me approach from this perspective. I think the reality between Anglophone Africa and Francophone Africa are quite different.
Okay.
Most English-speaking African nations actually have a positive outlook on colonialism and their former colonial masters. That's the truth. If you ask most Nigerians how they feel about the British colonizing us, they will actually tell you that the British did some really, really good things in Nigeria. They'll tell you, for instance, that they brought Christianity. They will tell you they brought education. They will tell you that they brought, they ended, horrible cultures like the killing of twins, human sacrifices, and whatever. So most Nigerians and most English-speaking Africans actually have a positive outlook of colonialism. However, from my little knowledge, I don't think French-speaking African nations actually think that way. And for valid reasons, even based on the principle of colonialism the French adopted in Africa, it was very horrible. It was the principle of assimilation. The French actually wanted to assimilate African nationals to their own culture. The French have always had this classist and condescending view, and they felt African culture is trash, and so they wanted to turn African nationals into French citizens. And that, even after colonialism, after a lot of African nations gained independence from French colonialism, there seemed to be that growing influence France still has on its former colonies in ways we can't really say with English-speaking African countries. That's the truth. For instance, I mean, we were speaking about this a couple of days ago that the foreign reserves of former French colonies are still being kept in France. What's the rationale behind that? That can be interpreted as French imperialism. The assassination of so many African nationals, African leaders by France over the years. That's an example of French imperialism. And there are so many examples like that. And so I can understand why these coups are taking place in French-speaking African countries. I can understand that. And I can understand that movement to isolationism, like you said. Now, I don't know whether you saw pictures of I think it's the Guinea president or Burkina Faso president meeting with Putin recently. Did you see that picture?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, so you can see that these countries, in a way to move away from French imperialism, they are also looking for powerful allies, right? And the way it seems to me is they are trying to trade one dictator for another dictator. You are trading French imperialism for Putin's dictatorship. I don't think Putin is the right guy to ally with. My point is Africa should have Africa's back. African countries should actually form a formidable force. We need to form a formidable union. All this trying to play the game between the West and the East, we already done that in the 20th century. No, Africa should have Africa's back. Trade with whichever country wants to trade with you. However, do it smart. Trade in the best interest of your own people. As an African leader, you've got to trade in the best interest of your people. But unfortunately, like I said earlier, we have the problem of leadership. Our leaders are extremely selfish. And for some of them that are puppets in the hands of all these Western powers, there's selfishness, there's greed, there's avarice. There's so many things going on the African continent in terms of leadership. And so I can understand why there's this feeling of isolationism. There's this anti-French sentiment going on in Africa. So.
Okay, thank you. Now, I want us to look at the response to these coups right up to now. When it started in 2020, it was just a couple of sanctions placed upon Mali, upon Guinea, and upon Burkina Faso. Now it has come to Niger, and the United States has spoken against it. ECOWAS gave a deadline. I think that was Sunday, just past Sunday, and said he gave a deadline for the president to be reinstated, and if not, they were going to intervene, militarily. And it didn't happen. So last Thursday, the ECOWAS met and they made a decision to give an order for a standby force. I don't know their plans yet. I don't know who is trying to lead them into that, but we know there's a standby force, and we don't know when they will intervene, but we know there's a standby force already, and that was ordered by the Nigerian president, your president, who is the head of ECOWAS right now. And countries like France has been supporting this move and saying, okay, it's better to intervene in Niger militarily. And I spoke to one of my friends the other day, and he said, there's a kind of hypocrisy going through this, and there was no military intervention called during the coup in Chad, meaning the coup was simply aligning with French interests. And now this in Niger is against French interests, and that's why they are trying to do the coup. So I just want to find out, do you think this decision to intervene in Niger militarily is a wise decision? And what do you think? Because I kind of understand the perspective of African leaders, most in the West. They are seeing this as a growing threat, and if they don't stop it now, it's going to happen to them. I read some funny posts on Facebook today. I don't know if it's true, but somebody said it's in the Nigerian military that the coup is kind of inspiring them to depose the Nigerian president. And the same thing happened in Ivory Coast, and the Ivorian president had to call is it Senegalese or Ivory Coast? You have to call those who instigated the coup in Niger as terrorists, label them as terrorists, because of the fear is going to happen to them. And believe me, all other leaders in other African nations are watching, even in Central Africa. Believe me, they are watching at it, and they know what's happening. So I want to find out, do you think this decision to intervene in Niger is it's a wise decision? And do you think it is just like is just like a response to protect political interests? And what do you think it's the best way if we have to stop these coups or something?
Okay, so in the interest of ECOWAS leaders, definitely a military intervention is the best thing to do. However, if Niger allies with Putin, it's going to be an all-out war. I know, yeah, we could make the case that Putin is actually busy fighting Ukraine currently, so it might not really be much help to Niger and other countries trying to ally with him. But let's say Putin gives Niger all the support. I think it's going to be an all-out war, and they may not be winners of it's going to be no winner, no vanquished, honestly.
Let me just to interject there, you know, the leaders of Burkina Faso and Mali said war against Niger is going to be like war against your own nations.
Exactly. So you can see that alliance, right?
Yes. You can continue your point, please.
All right. So from ECOWAS's perspective, yes, a military intervention in Niger, it's primarily to stop to stop a metastasis of that coup in their countries. You know, so it's essentially just to protect their own selfish interests at the end of the day. You know, however, the thing about this coup is this: Nigerian citizens are actually in support of the coup. You know, from the little information I've been able to get, you know, even from the person I spoke to a couple of days ago, he said Nigerian citizens are in support of the coup. He said there was actually a demonstration they held at a stadium that more than 30,000 people filled that stadium. And ordinarily, they wouldn't fill that stadium, ordinarily. And so the people are actually in support of the coup. And so the question is this: all these Western nations that talk about democracy and all that, and even Nigeria that is a so-called democracy, you know, why are you trying to depose a government the people are in support of? Exactly. So you can see the hypocrisy from that angle. And I can understand also the French interest in that country. You know, Niger supplies uranium to France. You know, I think more than 50% of French uranium need is supplied by Niger. 1 out of every 3 light bulbs or so in Niger is powered by uranium from Niger. So I can understand that French interest in Niger is being threatened by this coup. And so the need to want to militarily intervene in that country. But at the end of the day, it boils down to the principles of democracy. If the people say they want this junta, why are you intervening? And now you did ask a question: what is the best way to stop? You know, what is the best way to stop this from happening again in the ECOWAS region? Well, it's simple. Why don't you model a good version of democracy? Why don't think about it in the entire West African region? Let's say with the exception of maybe Ghana and maybe Senegal for a very long time. Like we can't point to other West African nations we can say we are proud of in terms of leadership, in terms of democracy. It's all about fraudulent elections. It's all about the political class disrespecting the constitution, and they don't seem to be punished for that. It's all about corruption and greed and avarice. That's the story for the entire region, And then you wonder why people are supporting a military intervention in their own country. Like you wonder why the people are supporting a coup to depose a so-called democratically elected president. You wonder why that is happening. And so the best way to forestall a coup from repeating in a coup intervention in the local affairs of any country in West Africa, the best way to prevent that from happening again is to model a good version of democracy. And until you do that, this feeling of disaffection, this feeling of disillusionment, this feeling of anti-establishment, this anti-establishment feeling most African nationals feel is going to continue for a very long time.
I just wanted to ask you that considering the current governance climate, the current governance architecture in Africa, do you foresee that this is going to happen in the nearest future again? Like this is going to happen to the nearest future again? Do you foresee that?
Nothing is guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed. You know, the thing you said about Nigerian military earlier, I read reports also this morning that there are rumors that there's a faction of the Nigerian military or so that are nursing a coup ambition, though the Nigerian army has dispelled those rumors, but it's just a rumor at the end of the day. So really the political architecture in Africa right now, it seems to be very fragile. It seems very, very fragile. And so no one knows. Maybe that's going to inspire other coups in the region as well. Who knows? Like, who knows?
It's I kind of watched a comedy yesterday, and they kind of asked this guy and said, what's the natural resource of Niger? He said uranium. They asked him, what's the natural resource of France? He said Niger. So coming in that line, I want to ask you this question about the issue of foreign interference, or foreign interference. As African states, right? We know in international relations, we have this issue of what they call bandwagoning. And if you're a small state, the bigger states are always trying to eat up on you. If you have to look at Niger's decision, even Mali's decision to bandwagon with Russia or the Chinese, should I say, it is because they think that the decision or the actions of French policy upon them, it's kind of demeaning to them more than, the consequences they can ever get from Russia. So I want to ask you, I want to find out from you, do you think it's wise? Do you think it's wise for a nation, like a smaller nation in Africa? For example, in Cameroon, I wouldn't mind to say, truthfully, I wouldn't mind to tell you that if we could have the same situation and a country like Cameroon has to bandwagon with a country like Russia or China, I would please. I wouldn't mind to say that. Seriously, I wouldn't mind to say that, because the impact of French policy in Africa, especially in Cameroon here, is something which it's unbelievable. I'm telling you, it's unbelievable. It's the root cause of all the unemployment and all the injustices. Like most of it, of what you see, it's just the impact of their policies. And we have leaders in Cameroon who are just there to implement French foreign policy, and it looks like there is no decision from the state house, which the French presidency does not approve of. There's no, every major project, everything is just like from France. So I want to find out from you, do you think it's a wise decision for a small African nation to say, okay, if we have this colonial master and his policies are kind of unjust to us, should we shift from the West and look to the East? And since the African Union is basically doing nothing about it.
True. Well, that might work out in the short term, but in the long run, you are setting yourself up for another form of neocolonialism or imperialism, truthfully. So my advice is, even if you are going to side with another superpower, do it in a smart way. But I honestly don't know how that is going to look like. But the truth is this: do not set yourself up for another version, another form of imperialism.
Okay.
Imagine Russian imperialism again. So you are trading French imperialism for Russian imperialism or Chinese imperialism. And for the Chinese imperialism, we can already see some of those effects in Africa already. There are so many African nations that are trapped in Chinese loans, and the way of repaying those loans is the Chinese taking over their resources. So do we really all want to have that on our hands as well, simply because we want to move away from French colonial imperialism? It's a dilemma. I'm not gonna lie, it's a dilemma, and I don't think I have any real solutions to that, to be honest. But the thing is, all of this point out to the fact that Africa should have Africa's back. Honestly, man, it's high time Africa had Africa's back. We don't even trade amongst ourselves. African countries don't even trade amongst themselves. Think about that. And then we wonder why the influence of these Western powers are so huge on the continent.
So I've been trying to, since the advent of these coups, in Niger right now, it's been ECOWAS who has been trying to intervene, and all they talk about is militarily. I haven't really heard anything concrete from the African Union. Do you think
exactly?
Really? So I just want to find out from you, what do you think the African Union should do in such a situation like this?
That's a loaded question. See, I don't think the African Union is as independent as it might seem on the outside. Because the truth is this: the African Union is still being supported by the America, the EU, and all these superpowers. They are still being supported directly or indirectly. Even the African Development Bank. Do you remember the saga that happened? Was it about 2 years ago when America said when this guy was reelected as president of Africa Development Bank, Akiwumi Adesina, was reelected. And America said they are not pleased with that election, that re-election, they were not pleased. America had to conduct another investigation. Do you see the insults? No, look at the insults. And we realized eventually that America is one of the biggest donors to Africa Development Bank. And so as long as you depend on these people for donations, for support, for help, of course, you are going to become a puppet in their hands. And that is why the African Union has been silent, conspicuously silent in all of this. So what exactly can the African Union do? If they want to do anything, let's say in the interest of the people of Niger, a call from the US or a call from the EU, is going to scare them. That we are going to stop donating, we are going to stop maybe this donation, or we're going to stop this, whatever, and then the shiver. So the point is, we don't really have that independence. We don't have that independence. And again, it goes back to what I said earlier. Africa should have Africa's back. Africa should have Africa's back. Our leaders are so useless. I did a video a couple of months ago in which I said it's an insult that African leaders travel to DC every year. African leaders travel to Paris. African leaders travel to Russia, Seoul. They travel to China for so-called Africa-China meeting, Africa-US meeting, Africa whatever meeting. All of them, 54 country leaders, they travel there. It's an insult. It's a huge insult. Why don't you just send an EU representative, to speak on behalf of the rest of the continent? Why don't you have something like that? And so the point is, the African Union is still a puppet, whether I like it or not. And so they can't really do anything in the interest of the people of Niger, or Africa.
In that light, I actually, during the Russia-African summit, I actually read a report which they said the Kenyan president refused to attend because he wasn't okay with the delegation that was going to Russia. He opted for an AU representation, not an African, because these African leaders go, they say it's a Russia-Africa summit, it's a US-Africa summit, but when they go to this summit, they don't negotiate policies, they don't negotiate based on the whole African continent, they negotiate deals individually. So President Ruto actually refused and said he wasn't going to go to Russia and propose that the AU send a delegation to speak on behalf of Africa as a whole, and not individual nations going to speak on behalf of themselves. Because mind me, most of these African leaders went to Russia, to seek, because of the coups that are happening, and the domestic problems they have, like to go to Russia to seek assurance and say, okay, Russia is our friend, and maybe if you try to depose me from power, this is the kind of people who are going to support me. Believe me, our president doesn't leave this country for no reason. If this summit was not important to him for national security's sake, I would say that if this summit was not important to him for national security's sake, he wouldn't have left the country. But he went there on himself, showing it was something which had to do with security. He had security concerns about Cameroon. That's why he went. I think so. So let's go to the last.
Is so low, man.
Yeah. Let's go to the last question. I just want to find out from you. Let's try and look at the domestic, regional, and global impact of this coup, and how do you think it can shape geopolitics in Africa?
Well, of course, Nigeria has shot its border with Niger, and so Nigeria has also cut supply of electricity to Niger. So I honestly don't know how the economy is thriving now in Niger. I have no idea. I can only imagine that a lot of businesses are affected already. Now I don't know of any major commodities we export from Niger. I don't know. So I don't think Nigeria is really going to suffer in any regard when it comes to that. I don't think so. But I think in terms of the global impact of this coup, definitely it's going to affect France. It's going to affect France, and that's why France is fighting tooth and nail to depose the junta. So now let me also add this. We live at a time whereby everybody's clamoring for climate change. We're clamoring for reduction of carbon emissions and everything. Now, the best way, one of the major ways of reducing emissions, right, is nuclear energy. Nuclear energy has a potential, of generating energy, right, without carbon emissions. No. So if any country wants to go that route, then obviously Niger will play a major role in that because of its uranium.
Uranium,
You know,
yeah.
Niger is going to play a major role in that. And so in terms of the nuclear industry globally, Niger definitely is playing a huge part in that. And so with the current coup, with the current military junta, I just don't know how that is going to play out. I suppose it's gonna really reduce the supply of uranium globally.
Okay. I want to thank you for all your inputs up to now. I don't know if you have any last remarks to make.
Not at all. Well, let me just say this: that all of this is evidence of the failures of leadership, and until we fix the fundamental question of leadership in Africa, we are forever going to, continue this endless cycle of coups, secession, coups and secessions and coups and secession. We are forever going to, continue with this cycle. And so, why don't we just consciously work on fixing the fundamental question of leadership?
Okay.
And then Africa can thrive and prosper.
Yeah, I quite agree with you on that, on leadership and on fixing the African leadership problem, if I say that. And also to comment on the decision to send in a standby force in Niger. I don't know if they actually thought about the consequences this was going to create, like a refugee crisis in Niger. That's the last thing we don't want to have. We don't want to have another situation where West Africa is in full-blown war. We don't want to have that after Sudan and the rest. We just don't want to have that. So we're kind of hoping that all this plays out well and the leaders are wise enough, not this time to represent their selfish interests, because I think all this noise and all this talk about intervening militarily is just for selfish interests and not really for the Nigerian people. So look,
speaking of insecurity, the Lake Chad Basin region already has its insecurity challenges. Already, Boko Haram, ISWAP, and what have you. So just imagine.
We just cannot cope with the refugee crisis.
Exactly.
We have a refugee situation in East Cameroon where we have these refugees coming in from the Central African Republic due to the insecurity there. And believe me, it's not easy to manage. So I'm trying to imagine if something like that happens in Niger, and the rest of all African nations are affected by that. It's not going to be something to condone. So we just hope they don't go down that road and everything turns to play out fine. So thank you for joining in. I'm going to make sure the link is available to you so you can watch again and share with other persons who want to watch. Thank you very much for your insight, and hoping and looking forward to more collaboration on this. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure is all mine. Thank you. Take care.
Right, man. Bye-bye. Have a nice rest of the week ahead of you.
You too. Yeah. Bye.